Our gospel reading for today, as I already mentioned to the children, is from the Gospel of John. It hops around a little bit. It begins with the beginning of what's called the prologue of John, an introductory passage that introduces us to John's understanding of who Jesus is. So let us listen for what the Spirit may speak to us now through these words. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And then we skip over the section that sort of interrupts the prologue, and especially its poetic sense, and tells us a little bit about John the Baptist, who's not the light. And then we join back later in the prologue to hear the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. And then finally, we move all the way over to chapter 3, the passage that includes Nicodemus visiting Jesus. It has the famous verses about, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son." We come to the part at the end that speaks of light and darkness, a part that often gets left out when we read the John 3:16 part. And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and people loved darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. For all who do evil hate the light and do not come to the light, so that their deeds may not be exposed. But those who do what is true come to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that their deeds have been done in God. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. If your neighborhood looks anything like mine, there are lots of lights. There are plenty of Christmas lights everywhere, not just the trees peeking out the windows of homes, but all over the houses. There's a house around the corner from me that actually brings in a bucket truck, those trucks that the power company use, to string lights all along the roof's eave. And there's another home nearby that has a huge tree in the yard with lights at the very top of it. I have no idea how it is. I've never seen it, so I have no idea how they actually get them up there. Lights have been part of Christmas as long as I can remember, although they do seem to have gotten a little more over the top in recent years. When we lived in Columbus, Ohio, one of the local radio stations sponsored a tacky tour, and you could get on a tour bus one night, a charter bus, and ride around with a group of the folks who listened to this radio station, visiting the gaudier houses that they had found after being recommended by different listeners to this radio station. Now, as I understand it, this Christmas light thing evolved out of an old German custom of putting candles on evergreens at the time of Christmas. German immigrants apparently brought the practice to this country, and when electric lights became available, they fortunately finally replaced the candles on the tree and then began to migrate everywhere else, so that we have all these lights now at Christmas. And it certainly makes sense that lights are so associated with Christmas, what with the star and the wise men, and passages like ours today that speak of the light that shines in the darkness, with services in the dark on Christmas Eve. I mean, how could lights not have become a part of our Christmas traditions? Of course, we live in a world that is brightly lit all the time. The electric lights of our modern world have all but shone in the darkness and overcome it. You have to find yourself some desolate wilderness somewhere to see real darkness, to witness the Milky Way or the stars and the planets and their fine glory when there's a moonless night. Even when we go to bed at night, little lights peer out at us from the TV and the charger and the clock and the cable box. In our world, we could actually use a little more natural darkness in our nights. But if our technology has all but vanquished the night, there is still plenty of the darkness of the sort John speaks of in his gospel. There were a lot of people who did not want the Senate report on torture to see the light of day. Some were genuinely concerned that it could incite violence against the U.S. abroad, but I suspect that most simply did not want it public. There are disturbing things in that report, things that a lot of us just as soon not know about. It runs counter to who we think and say we are. Even many people who support the notion of enhanced interrogation techniques still want to keep it off in the shadows, in the dark. When the Congress passed a spending bill earlier this month, I, like a lot of you, I suspect, was happy to see that we were not going to have another government shutdown. I and a lot of others were less happy to hear about some of the things that always get stuck in these sort of bills, those pet spending projects and those statutes that never could make it through if they had to be discussed publicly, if they had to be seen in the light. Recently, the hacking of Sony's Hollywood studios has revealed the sort of seamy underside of the Hollywood business. Sony's probably no worse than any of the other studios, probably not than a lot of other corporations in general. I suspect there's an awful lot of corporations that have an awful lot of stuff they would never want to see made public. And I have to think that at the intersection of the corporate world and the political world, there's truly a land of deep darkness, to borrow a phrase from the prophet Isaiah, a realm that loves the darkness and does not like the light at all. There is much in our world that loves darkness and fears the light. It likes to remain in the shadows, but we know about it. We've glimpsed it. We know well the darkness of the world, and many of us have seen enough of it that, well, we're simply numbed to it, cynical about it. That's just the way the world is, we say. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all peoples. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Light penetrates our world's deepest darkness. Light for which our Christmas lights are but a paltry symbol. Light that is stronger than the worst darkness our little worlds or all the world can create. The darkness of the world does not like the light. And so it did not care much for Jesus. The darkness killed Jesus. But that did not quench the light. The darkness of the world still does not care for light, and so does not care much for Jesus. And that is true even of a number of people who bear the name Christian. People sully the name, connecting it to hatred and all manner of darkness, but the light still shines. We in the church sometimes look more like the world than like the light. We sometimes seem to prefer darkness over light, not wanting people to know much of what we do. But the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. That's why we celebrate Christmas. It's not just because of a beautiful, beloved story of a birth long ago. No, it is because of the wonderful news that the light, that wonderful eternal light that existed prior to the Big Bang, that light has come to us, has suffered for us, and simply will not leave us to the light that we create, the darkness that we create, and to the darkness that we so often seem to prefer. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And we are invited to come into that light, to learn the ways of life and light that Jesus shows to us. And when we come into the light and life of Jesus, into the true aliveness of Jesus that cannot be contained, when the life and light of Christ comes into us, it fills us and spills over into our lives so that the light is revealed to the world. Light and light shine in us in ways that we cannot hold back. When the life and the light and the aliveness of Christ shines in us, the true promise and hope of Christmas shines. And the world gets just a tiny bit brighter. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. All praise and glory to the eternal light who became flesh for our sakes and who calls us to new life in Christ. Thanks be to God.